Mount Rushmore for horror movies needs a slasher movie, and like, where do you really go? Do you go with Scream? Do you go with, there's a lot to pick from, but I think with Halloween, like, it's the pioneer of slasher movies. It started everything, whether it's the mask, the knife, the female like protagonist. It's all there, and I just feel like that was just genre defining. It's what you mentioned at the start, Paul. It's a genre defining movie that if that doesn't happen, you don't get Scream, you don't get all of these slasher movies that still happen to this day. So let's just put Halloween on the list, get it out there, because I think it should be at least considered.
Yeah. Funny enough, so as I said before at the top, like I've been like deep diving into like
Mm,
I think on my letterbox, like horror has been the top category for the past three
mm,
years. And I watched I think it's 1976, it might be earlier, 74, Black Christmas.
mm,
And I was stunned at just how underrated and underappreciated that was because that came out before Halloween. That's a
mm.
slasher film where somebody is targeting sorority sisters. So I was like, oh wow, so you're
Quite
they're
similar. Yeah.
and he's prank phone calling them as well. I'm
Mm,
going, oh, so you've got Scream in there
mm,
with the
mm,
phone
mm,
call element, but they all credit Halloween as being the one,
mm,
like the one that kicked it all off. But when I dig a bit deeper, it's like actually there was some before it.
mm,
I will 100% admit it's the most influential.
mm,
And
mm,
I mean, they even what you mentioned, it was also the seasonal activity. Like they
mm,
linked it to Halloween, which
mm,
inspired Friday the 13th
mm,
directly. The producer of Friday the
mm.
13th went, but that worked. What other
Yeah.
spooky date can I claim? And
Yeah.
that's literally Friday the 13th wouldn't exist without Halloween. So
Exactly.
yeah, I
And
think
that when that
influence wise, it's Halloween has the slasher definition.
it was like, yeah, like, and I think if you do have a slasher, like, space on the Mount Rushmore. And when you mentioned the Mount Rushmore of horror movies, the first movie I thought of was Halloween. It's not my favorite horror movie, but that popped into my head straight away. And when that motherfucker sat up like the Undertaker, I really wish I was young enough to be sitting in the cinema to fucking see that and see the reaction to the audience, because that's bigger. I know they had the Jason coming out of the water on Friday the 13th and stuff, and that was obviously a big surprise. But seeing that fucker sit up and that shot of him just doing it right there in the background, like, it'll be with me forever. Like, the Undertaker stole it from the movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because when we get to the phase of how we're going to rank it, we're going to have to get into those kind of conversations. Like,
Mm-hmm,
do
mm-hmm.
do we really think John Carpenter has two slots on the Mount Rushmore? So one of them
Yeah.
has to go.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm also kind of curating it by subgenre. Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't even want to have like two creature features as well,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe two like from the same year, like
Yeah.
as Paul Bush is swinging over there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, Halloween, it's so difficult to ignore the impact that it had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a big fan. Like even last Halloween, myself, my brother, and my wife rewatched it, and my wife doesn't watch horror films, and she was very silent during the experience of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, she's like, I'm not sure I really enjoy what's happening to me right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's also just a masterclass in simplicity. And as
Mm-hmm.
the older I get, and as a screenwriter, a filmmaker as well, like I'm really embracing simplicity, like stripping it down to like its pure
Mm-hmm.
essence, and then going, what resonates out of this? And
Yeah.
even the soundtrack alone is like an amazing moment of like this
Mm-hmm.
is simplicity at its finest, and
Yeah.
it resonates and it creates a memory to it.
There's a great clip of I can't remember the actor's name that played the doctor, and it's him getting interviewed in between takes, and he's basically just like cutting a promo on John Carpenter. He's like, I've no idea what the fuck is going on. I don't know what this script is. This is basically dog shit. It's just like, I just love hearing things like that, because like, this is another movie that probably should have failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you know
I like
that?
it a lot, but like it's interesting that like he did want to turn it into an anthology
Mm,
series like every year, but I think he got forced to make the second one still with Michael Myers, but then he
mm,
got to do three Season of the Witch and
mm.
wanted it to be, look, it will have a Halloween movie every year, but it's a different genre.
Yeah.
Then Season of the Witch obviously didn't do very, very well, part three, so but they had to
It,
go
it,
back to the well, you know.
is there a movie franchise that has more timelines than Halloween? because it is actually ridiculous. They restart that timeline so many times to go from like the first movie straight into something, the first two movies straight into something. It's crazy. You'd actually look up the timelines. Like one of them goes straight from
H20 or something as well.
Yeah,
Remember that?
I think that was straight from the second movie straight into the H20 or H2O, whatever it's called.
H2O.
H2O.
There's
isn't that ironic?
H2O or it's 20 years
H2O.
It's 20 years after the first movie. So I thought it was meant to be H20.
No, I think it was actually marketed like, and they even in the trailer say H2O. But it's supposed to be Halloween 20. It's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ironic though that like we even celebrate the simplicity of the first one and how it led to the complexity of the sequels. It's like you completely overanalyze this concept.
Or they beat it into the ground.
About a fun fact about it too. So it's set like it's supposed to take place in Illinois, but I think it was actually filmed in California.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to make it look like October, but there was no leaves on the ground. So they actually had bags of leaves that they'd run to each location, and in front of the screen they would cover the ground with leaves. They would film, they'd scoop up all the leaves, and they would actually be very particular about getting all the leaves because they don't have that many of them. So there would be like arguments on their set of like, oh, get the leaves, get the leaves. We got to use them for the next shot. And I just love that. Like, I love how simple that is. And when you watch it, like, it's well done. I never think that it's not where they say it is. But when I learned that they've actually just take bags of leaves and they pour it on the ground, I think it's delicious.